I counted my breaths while the oxygen alarm stayed green. 10 slow breaths, then 11, waiting for the little chirp that never came. My chest felt tight. The fan sounded wrong. It stayed green. I woke to stale air and a quiet fan. Not off. Just quiet. Like a small animal trying to hide. The smell in the node was old, bleach and plastic, but flat. No bite. My tongue felt furry. I pushed to the panel and checked the CO2 readout. It was a little high, higher than it should have been after sleep. I tapped the screen. It didn't change. The oxygen indicator showed normal. Green. Steady. I drifted down to the scrubbers. I popped the first filter and saw a skin on it. Black, thin, glossy in the light. At first I thought it was soot from a seal burn. It came off in a sheet when I pulled at it. It stretched and tore like old tape. Under it was a wet smear and a smell like someone mopped a bathroom and left the rag. I scrubbed it with wipes and bleach. The bleach cut it. My hands stung. I rinsed the frame, let it dry, and slid it back. The fan bumped up a little, just a little higher. I took a breath. It still felt wrong. I floated with my ear against the vent. When I breathed out, I heard a soft rustle in the duct, like paper. I didn't like that. I said, "That's stupid. It's just the valve." I talked to the air, like we all do when we're alone. "Stop it. Work." I said that out loud. Then I counted. 2 breaths. 3. The oxygen alarm stayed green. It came back thicker in an hour. I was logging samples and got a reminder to check air. I pulled the filter and the black film was already there. It was furry now. Filaments, hair thin, laid over the mesh. I wiped and the cloth came back gray and then black. It stuck in the weave. The bleach and plastic stink climbed up my nose and stayed. I tried heat. There's a heater pad we use to loosen cold lines. I pressed it around the frame and watched the temp. I didn't cook it too hard, just warm. The black film went soft and bubbled a little. I thought, good, that's it. I cleaned it again. I suited to the next module and swapped the scrubber box there. Same film on that filter. Not as much, but present. I called down. "I've got a contamination on the filters," I said. There was a delay. "Describe," they said. I told them black film, sticky. I said the CO2 was creeping. The oxygen light was green. The fan in Node B was too quiet. "Run bleach protocol and log growth," they said. "We're pulling data." Their voices were calm. I hated how calm they sounded, but that's their job. I floated back and wiped again. I taped gauze over the vent I'd just cleaned, thinking it would keep it out. That's when I heard the rustle from the next duct over. I put my ear to it. I breathed in, breathed out. The rustle matched me. Not the fan cycling. Mine. The filaments in the vent moved when I breathed. I opened the duct panel. Inside the veins, in the seam, were little threads. They didn't wave like hair. They held to the direction of flow. When I blew gently at them, they reached into it. I said no and closed the panel and went to the damper handle on that loop. I opened it wide to flush. When I watched the airflow graph on the laptop, the line jumped, then slid down. Not a smooth curve. A step. Then another. Like something closed halfway, then again, in little clicks. I floated back to the damper. The handle had drifted, just a hair. I thought I pushed it wrong. I forced it open again. It drifted again, only when the fan pulled. I could feel something soft where the blade sealed. I didn't see it, but my fingers told me there was a layer on the edge. The red status LED under the rack flashed and then went back to green. It did it on my breath. That's not a thing, I told myself. That's me being jumpy. I held my breath. The LED stayed steady. I exhaled hard. It flickered. I stopped playing games. I shut that entire duct run. Starved it. The CO2 readout climbed slower in the other modules. The fan pitch in Node B went up and down in small steps, like it was clearing its throat. I felt better, for a bit. Then the air in Node A went still. The light drift changed. My hair floated wrong. You learn to feel airflow up there. You know when it stops. I saw it in the graphs. Flow fell off in A and spiked in C. The vents behind me clicked. The ones ahead of me clicked. The hatches didn't close, but the little vents around them did. I floated to A and tried to open a little damper there. It was stuck. I pulled the panel. The hinge was laced with the same filaments. They ran across the seam like roots. I cut them with scissors and opened it. As soon as the flow went through, the filaments laid across it again, thicker, like they had been waiting. They stretched and then settled over the gap. The noise from the fan changed, lower, a little choke, then a soft, steady hiss. My breath got louder in my ears. I counted. 7, 8. The oxygen alarm stayed green. The CO2 rose. It didn't make sense. I touched the oxygen sensor port, the little nose that samples the air for that alarm. The metal felt cool. There was condensation beating on the panel around it. That was wrong. We don't get dew there. I pressed a finger to the port. It was slick. There was a thin skin over it, black, stretched tight. Under it, I felt a bubble. When I poked a hole, the green LED blinked to red for a second and chirped. Then it went green again. I pulled my hand away. My finger came back with a black smear. That was when I felt sick. I realized it had sealed the little nose and kept the alarm happy. The alarm was sniffing its own little pocket. I went hard after it then. I pulled every filter I could reach. I washed them in bleach and hot water and wiped the frames with peroxide and ethanol. I put towels in the vents and sat there and breathed at them and listened. The rustle went away in the ones I hit. It got louder in the ones I didn't. Fans started to change pitch for no reason. Low, high, low. Sometimes they pulsed, 1, 2, on the rhythm I had been using to count. I swear they did. I tried to count differently, faster. The pulses sped up. I slowed. They slowed. There was a pattern. It was watching my breathing through the draw in the ducts, and it liked it when I fed it CO2. I starved it in one loop by killing the blower there and sealing both ends with tape and towels. The CO2 stabilized. I felt it pull air around me from other grills, gentle at first, then steady. The vents on both my sides made a slight tick, and the pitch through them changed together, like hands cupped around my head. It rerouted. My cheeks felt the drift change. I rolled and put my back against the bulkhead, and the air tugged at my face. "Don't do that," I said, and I laughed because it was stupid to say that. I could hear my voice bounce in the metal. I opened a hatch to the next node to change the path. The little vent above it was webbed with black strings. I brushed them and they stuck to my glove like spiderweb, but they were wetter than that. They left streaks. The little red LED by that vent went red and stayed red. That was the first solid red, and it scared me. The CO2 number ticked up faster. I asked down for permission to purge the station. "We're not there yet," they said. They told me to move to the safe chair, close the doors, let the system self-balance. I did that. I strapped in the seat and closed the hatch. The air in my little space stayed okay for a few minutes. The fans outside went through a sequence. I watched the airflow lines on my laptop move like someone was drawing them on purpose. One loop maxed, then another. Vents behind me clicked off. I opened my hatch a crack to check and felt the rush try to pull it closed. I shut it and locked it again. I felt stupid for thinking it was on purpose. But the numbers were too clean. It wasn't like a clog. It was like someone testing me. When the CO2 got high enough, my head hurt and I couldn't think straight. I stopped counting my breaths for maybe a minute. When I started again, the fans pulsed on my count. I decided. I told them, I'm going to purge. I put the suit on. I did the checks. The smell inside the suit was my sweat and rubber and old air. I watched the little needles and the number for my suit CO2 went up and down as I breathed. I set the internal fans on high. I opened the emergency purge hatches module by module, not all at once. That way the station wouldn't tumble. The first blast sucked loose paper, crumbs, a pen. It pulled little black threads out of a grill and they snapped free and drifted like ash. The fans screamed. Then one by one the big blowers choked. Their sound went high, then cut to nothing. The red status LEDs under their covers went from green to off. Not even red, just out. Panels that always opened swelled and didn't open. I jammed a wrench under one and pried. The edge came up and then stuck again. I looked under and saw the filaments had formed a sheet. They didn't wrap the metal. They laid across the gap and flexed with the pressure, and then, when they browned at the edge from the cold, dry bleed, they thickened behind it, like muscles replacing muscles. I hit it with the wrench until my arm hurt. The sheet tore, and then sealed again. I cursed, and then I started to feel stupid for wasting time. External, I said. No one answered. I said it again. The delay bit me. I didn't wait. I moved to the airlock and left the main purge valves open behind me. I took the thermal knife and a pry bar. I cycled fast. The suit fan spun loud. The air in the lock felt thin even before it pumped down. The little window went white with condensation from my breath, then clear, then my breath crusted it and it stayed foggy at the edges. I spun the outer. The earth was a big, bright thing beyond the handrail. My hands shook. I clipped in and went out. The valve was stiff, and I was clumsy. My gloves felt like bags full of sand. I got to the external purge handle and tried to move it. It wouldn't budge. The gap around it was packed with frost and something darker. I ran the thermal knife edge around the seam. The frost hissed and disappeared. A thin black ring remained. When I picked at it with the tip, it gave a little, then stuck to the knife and stretched. Filaments. It had gone all the way outside. It had found the cold, and it didn't care. I slid the pry bar in and leaned. My tether pulled at my waist. The bar slipped, then bit. The handle moved a centimeter. My hands ached. I cursed. I counted breaths without meaning to. 5. 6. My suit alarm beeped at me for overexertion. I ignored it. I got both boots under a rung, pushed, and the handle went. The valve opened. The rush was silent in the suit, but I saw the flex blow past. I saw a little sheet of black rip out of the seam and twist. It snapped back to the edge like gum. I held it open as long as I could. The suit CO2 rose. My head got fuzzy. I saw red in the corner of my vision. I don't know if it was the earth or the status light in my faceplate. I kept counting. 8, 9, 10. I thought, if I let go now, I don't know if I will get back in. I thought, if I don't, at least it will be cold in there for a while. I let go and shoved back to the hatch. I missed the first grab. My hand slid on the rail. I got it on the second. I wanted to throw up. my mouth filled with that bleach and plastic taste from earlier, even though the suit filters don't smell like that. I went hand over hand, slow and stupid, and dove into the lock. I slapped the inner control and the door moved, slow, like heavy syrup. The lock filled with thin air. I blinked hard. There were black threads on the inside of the little viewport. Just a few. Stuck to the seam. They moved ever so slightly when I breathed. I went back in and closed every blow-off. The fans came back a little. They sounded raw. The red LEDs under the racks glowed dull. The CO2 finally dropped. Not to normal, but down. I floated there and let my arms hang and listened. There was a silence I hadn't noticed in days. No rustle. I slept with the suit half on. When I woke, my throat hurt like I had swallowed a rough cloth and pulled it back up. My lips were cracked. I went around the station slow. I pulled panels and saw scorch and dead film on most of the vents. It had gone brown. When I rubbed it, it broke like old leaves. I got the bleach and wiped the seams. The smell made my eyes water. I wiped until the cloths came back white. The airflow lines on the screen were normal curves again. No steps. No matching my count. I had cut it down. I had not killed it. I knew that before I saw the patch. The twist was this. The oxygen alarm was green, not because the oxygen was fine, but because the little sensor port had been its pet, set aside, sealed off, fed. I found another one later. A tiny blister under a black film at a different sensor point. When I poked it, a clear little bubble snapped and the light blinked red and then right back to green. It had learned where the station watched itself and it had put on a show. I kept the suit on inside for a day, to be safe. I took it off for 10 minutes to wash. The fan sounded normal and I let myself think it was over. I pulled the suit filter to inspect it and there it was. Right on the mesh, a neat little patch. Not a smear, a square. I don't know how it made the edges so straight. Maybe it grew to the frame. The threads were stubbly and all pointed one way, toward the draw. When I held it up, it made a sound like tissue paper when the airflow went through. Dry, papery. I swore and almost dropped it. I dunked it in bleach until the surface bubbled and the stink took me back to the first day. The foam turned gray and then black flecks rose and I fished them out and sealed them in a bag. I was careful after that. I taped off the little sensor ports and wiped them twice a day. I used heat and cold. I ran the fans at odd times. I counted my breaths and then I stopped because I didn't like to hear them. I still hear the rasp sometimes. When the fans are low and I lean close to a vent, and I hold my breath for a second. Between my breaths, in that thin space, there is a dry, papery rasp. If you don't believe me, you can try it yourself. Disable a vent for a minute and breathe close to see if your alarms stay green. I hope you enjoyed that one. Sometimes these stories stay with you longer than you expect. If you'd like to hear more, subscribe for the next night's story. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe watch another before the lights go out. See you in the next one.